The discrepancy on the ledgers was small, a mere 3% variance in the shipping logistics column. But to Nicholas Ricchetti, it screamed like a siren in a silent room. He sat in the high-backed leather chair of his office, the glow of 3 monitors casting sharp shadows across his face. It was 2:14 a.m. The rest of New York City might have been sleeping or drowning in the storm that raged outside, but Nicholas was dissecting the anatomy of a betrayal. 3% didn't happen by accident. 3% was theft disguised as incompetence, and he despised nothing more than a thief who lacked the courage to look him in the eye. He minimized the spreadsheet, the headache behind his eyes pulsing in time with the distant thunder rolling over Manhattan. His penthouse, a fortress of glass and steel perched 40 stories above the chaos, usually offered him clarity. Tonight, it felt suffocating. The air conditioning hummed a low, sterile note that grated on his nerves. He needed water. He needed to step away from the digital evidence of disloyalty before he decided which of his capos would answer for it in the morning. Pushing away from the obsidian desk, Nicholas stood and stretched, the expensive fabric of his dress shirt straining across his shoulders. He walked out of the office and into the hallway. The residence was dark, illuminated only by the faint, ambient city light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was a space designed for intimidation, not comfort, minimalist, cold, and echoing with the kind of silence that money bought. The staff had been dismissed hours ago. The chef, the housekeepers, the assistants, they operated on a strict schedule that ensured Nicholas never had to interact with the domestic machinery of his own life. He preferred it that way. Invisibility was the highest standard of service. He reached the top of the floating staircase that spiraled down to the main living area. He took the first step, his bare feet silent on the polished stone, intending to head straight for the wet bar. But he stopped. A sound drifted up from the open-concept kitchen below. It was a soft, rhythmic scraping. Not the mechanical hum of an appliance, but the deliberate human noise of plastic against metal. Nicholas froze. His hand didn't go for a weapon. He was in his own home, behind 3 layers of biometric security. But his body shifted instantly into a state of predatory alertness. He hadn't authorized any overtime. The night cleaning crew wasn't due until tomorrow. He moved to the railing, looking down into the cavernous kitchen. A single light was on, the under-cabinet LED strip above the main island, casting a warm, focused pool of gold amidst the shadows. There was a woman standing there. Nicholas narrowed his eyes, adjusting to the gloom. He recognized the uniform immediately. The slate-gray dress with the modest white collar, the standard attire for the day staff. It was Chloe Evans. He knew her name because he made it his business to know the identity of every single person who breathed the same air as him. He knew she was 26, that she had been hired 3 months ago to replace his retiring housekeeper, and that her background check had flagged significant, though non-criminal debt. He had approved her clearance because debt made people desperate for work, and desperate people worked hard. But she wasn't working. Nicholas descended the stairs, hugging the wall where the shadows were deepest. He stopped at the bottom, hidden by the partition of the living room, giving him a direct line of sight to the island. Chloe was hunched over the counter. She looked smaller than he remembered from the brief glimpses he'd caught of her in the hallways. Her blonde hair, usually pinned back in a severe professional bun, was fraying at the edges, loose strands falling across her forehead. She looked exhausted, her shoulders slumped with a weight that seemed to press her down toward the marble. On the counter in front of her sat the heavy copper roasting pan from his dinner. The chef had prepared a prime rib roast, enough to feed 6 men. Nicholas had eaten 2 thin slices before losing his appetite to the ledger sheets. The rest, pounds of high-quality, perfectly cooked beef, surrounded by roasted root vegetables and herbs, was destined for the trash. His instructions were strict. No leftovers, fresh start every day. Chloe held a plastic container in one hand, a cheap, clouded thing that looked like it had been washed 1,000 times. In her other hand was a plastic spatula. She wasn't stealing the silverware. She wasn't raiding the liquor cabinet for vintage scotch. She was stealing his garbage. Nicholas watched, fascinated and disturbed, as she worked with surgical precision. She scooped up the slices of cold beef, arranging them in the container to maximize space. She scraped the congealed jus from the bottom of the pan, drizzling it over the meat as if it were liquid gold. She added the carrots and potatoes, packing them into the corners. Her movements were not greedy, they were reverent. She treated the discarded food with more respect than his wealthy associates treated their million-dollar investments. She paused for a second, her hand shaking as she reached for a piece of fat that had fallen onto the counter. She hesitated, looking at it, then quickly popped it into her mouth. She closed her eyes as she chewed, a look of pure, unadulterated relief washing over her face. Nicholas felt a strange tightness in his chest. It wasn't pity. He didn't believe in pity. But it was a sharp jolt of reality. He threw away more food in a day than most people saw in a week. But seeing the physical act of someone salvaging it was jarring. Chloe sealed the container. She wrapped it in a paper towel, then another, likely to mask the heat or the smell, though the food was cold. She opened a battered canvas tote bag that sat on the floor and shoved the container deep inside, beneath a folded sweater. Then, the cleanup began. This was the part that made Nicholas's eyes narrow. A thief who grabs and runs is acting on impulse. A thief who cleans up the crime scene is calculating. Chloe took the roasting pan to the sink. She didn't just rinse it. She scrubbed it. She dried it. She placed it in the dishwasher in the exact slot it belonged. She returned to the island, sprayed the counter with disinfectant, and wiped it down until the marble gleamed, removing any fingerprint, any grease spot, any evidence that she had been there. She checked her watch. A cheap digital piece with a cracked face. Panic flickered in her eyes. It was late. Far too late for the buses to be running frequently. She grabbed her bag, clutching it to her chest like a shield, and hurried toward the service exit near the pantry. She moved with the silent, practiced gait of someone who spent her life trying not to be seen. The door clicked shut behind her. The kitchen was empty again. Pristine. Silent. Nicholas stepped out of the shadows and walked to the island. He ran a finger across the marble where the pan had been. It was spotless. If he hadn't been standing there, he would never have known she had taken anything. That was the problem. He stared at the service door. Why the secrecy? If she was hungry, why not ask? The chef threw this food away. Why risk her job, her security clearance, for leftovers? Unless it wasn't just about hunger. Unless the desperation ran deeper. His mind, trained to see threats in every shadow, began to spin scenarios. Debt. The background check had shown massive debt. A woman with that kind of financial leverage against her was a target. If she was sneaking around his house at 2 a.m. to steal meat, what else could she be pressured to take? How easy would it be for a rival family, the Gallows, or the encroaching Russian factions, to offer her $10,000 to slip a listening device under his desk, or to photograph the documents he left on the dining table? The theft of the food might be a test, a way to see if the internal sensors were active, a way to gauge the response time. Or maybe she was just hungry. The duality of the possibilities irritated him. Nicholas hated uncertainty. He needed to know the variable he was dealing with. Was Chloe Evans a starving innocent? Or was she a security breach waiting to happen? He turned and walked to the wall panel that controlled the exterior cameras. He punched in his code. The screen flickered to life, showing the service entrance on the side of the building. On the screen, Chloe pushed open the heavy steel door and stepped out into the deluge. The storm had intensified. Rain fell in sheets, blurring the gray scale of the camera feed. She had no umbrella. She pulled her thin coat tighter around herself, lowered her head, and began to run. She didn't head for the employee subway station. She was running toward the bus stop on the avenue, blocks away. She looked fragile. The wind whipped her clothes against her frame, showing how thin she actually was. Nicholas tapped the screen, zooming in. She wasn't running aimlessly. She was checking over her shoulder. Once. Twice. Paranoia? Or was she meeting someone? Damn it, Nicholas muttered. He couldn't let it go. If he went back to bed now, he'd be wondering about it all night. He needed to see where she went. He needed to see if she went to a frantic, poverty-stricken home, or if she met a handler in a black sedan around the corner. He spun around and headed for the private elevator that bypassed the lobby and went straight to the secure garage. He didn't call his security detail. This wasn't official business, and he didn't want Ethan asking questions about why the boss was tailing the cleaning lady. This was a personal exorcism of suspicion. The garage was cool and smelled of rubber and gasoline. Nicholas walked past the row of vehicles, the Ferrari he never drove, the Rolls-Royce for official functions, and stopped at the matte black SUV. It was armored, bulletproof, and nondescript enough to blend into the city traffic at night. He climbed in, tossing his phone onto the passenger seat. He keyed the ignition, the engine purring with a restrained power. He waited for the heavy gate to roll up, drumming his fingers on the leather wheel. He wasn't doing this to save her. He told himself that firmly. He was doing this to secure his perimeter. If she was compromised, he would fire her tonight. If she was just a thief, he would fire her tonight. He pulled out onto the wet asphalt of the street, the wipers slashing rhythmically against the windshield. He spotted her immediately. She was a dark shape moving against the blurred lights of the city, splashing through puddles, still clutching that bag of food as if it contained state secrets. She reached the bus stop just as the M15 lumbered into view, its headlights cutting through the rain. She boarded. Nicholas hung back, letting a taxi get between them. He kept his eyes on the taillights of the bus. He would follow her to the end of the line if he had to. He would see exactly what Chloe Evans was hiding in the dark, and he would decide her fate before the sun came up. The hunt was on. The windshield wipers of the armored SUV sliced through the deluge with a hypnotic, rhythmic thud, battling a storm that seemed intent on drowning the entire borough. Nicholas kept the vehicle 3 car lengths behind the city bus, his gloved hands loose on the steering wheel, but his eyes sharp, tracking the red taillights as they blurred in the downpour. He had left the polished steel and glass canyons of Manhattan behind miles ago. The scenery had shifted, deteriorating into the jagged skyline of the Bronx. Here, the buildings were lower, squatting in the darkness like bruised knuckles. Streetlights flickered intermittently, casting sickly yellow pools of light on cracked sidewalks where trash bags piled up like sandbags against a flood. This was not his territory. The Ricchetti family held influence here, certainly. Everyone paid tribute eventually. But the streets belonged to the scavengers, the low-level gangs, and the desperate. The bus hissed to a halt at a corner that looked desolate enough to be a film set for the end of the world. The hydraulic doors groaned open. Nicholas killed his headlights, plunging the SUV into the cover of shadows provided by a parked delivery truck. He watched. A single figure stepped off. Chloe Evans. From the climate-controlled safety of his vehicle, Nicholas analyzed her movements. She stepped into a puddle that submerged her sneakers instantly. She didn't flinch. She simply adjusted her grip on the canvas tote bag, pulling it high against her chest, shielding it with her body as if it contained bullion rather than cold roast beef. The wind whipped her thin coat against her legs, but she moved with a grim, determined speed. She wasn't strolling. She was traversing a combat zone. Nicholas rolled his window down an inch. The smell of wet asphalt, ozone, and decaying garbage drifted into the leather-scented cabin. He needed to hear the environment. He scanned the perimeter. To his left, an alleyway mouth yawned black and empty. To his right, a row of boarded-up storefronts. Chloe reached the middle of the block. She was heading toward a pre-war tenement building that had clearly lost its war decades ago. The brickwork was crumbling, the fire escape rusting into orange streaks down the facade. Then, the shadows detached themselves from a recessed doorway. Nicholas didn't move, but his pulse dropped into a slow, lethal cadence. 2 men. They didn't emerge with the chaotic energy of muggers. They stepped out with the arrogant entitlement of ownership. One was tall, lanky, wearing a leather jacket that had seen better decades. The other was stockier, with a shaved head that glistened under the street lamp. They blocked Chloe's path. Nicholas watched her reaction. A civilian would have screamed or turned to run. Chloe did neither. She stopped dead, her posture rigid. She had expected this. The realization soured Nicholas's stomach. This wasn't a random crime. This was a schedule. He reached into the door panel and wrapped his fingers around the cold grip of his suppressed 9mm. He didn't draw it yet. He needed to know the players. "You're late, Chloe," the tall man said. His voice carried over the rain, a raspy baritone thick with an accent Nicholas placed immediately. Albanian. Rough guttural vowels. I don't control the traffic, Drayton, Chloe replied. Her voice was steady, though Nicholas, trained to read fear in the micro-tremors of a human body, saw her knees shaking. Traffic, the stocky one mocked, stepping closer. He invaded her personal space, forcing her back toward the graffiti-covered wall of a bodega. Traffic doesn't pay the interest. The clock ticks whether the bus moves or not. I have the payment, Chloe said quickly. She shifted the tote bag to one hand, balancing it precariously against her hip, and reached into her coat pocket with the other. It's all here. Just let me get inside. Not yet, Drayton said. He reached out, not for the money, but for her arm. He gripped her bicep, hard. Nicholas saw Chloe wince, but she didn't pull away. She knew that pulling away would only invite violence. We aren't just here for the cash tonight. The boss is losing patience. He wants the drive. Nicholas's eyes narrowed. The drive. I told you, Chloe said, her voice rising in pitch, desperate. I don't have it. My father didn't leave me anything but debts. I don't know what drive you're talking about. I've turned the apartment upside down. There's nothing. Your father was a thief, just like you. The stocky man spat. He stole the keys to the kingdom before he died. We know he gave it to you. He gave me nothing, Chloe cried out. He died broke. Look at me. Do I look like someone sitting on a fortune? Drayton sneered, his eyes raking over her soaked uniform, her muddy shoes. You look like a liar. Maybe you need a reminder of what happens to liars. He shoved her. It wasn't a lethal push, but against the slick pavement, it was enough. Chloe slipped. She went down hard on her knees, the canvas bag flying from her hand. It landed in a slurry of oil and rainwater in the gutter. No. The scream that tore from her throat wasn't for her own safety. It was for the bag. She scrambled on hands and knees, ignoring the men, reaching for the tote. The stocky man laughed and kicked the bag. It skidded across the sidewalk, stopping against the tire of a parked car. Leave it, Drayton commanded. Give me the cash. Chloe froze. She looked at the bag, then at the men. Slowly, defeated, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, damp wad of bills. Her tips, the $40 or $50 she had earned clearing tables for men who spent that much on a single cigar. Drayton snatched the money. He counted it in seconds. $42, he said, his voice dripping with disgust. This doesn't even cover the gas we use to drive here. It's all I have, Chloe whispered, still on the ground, the rain plastering her hair to her skull. Please, I get paid on Friday. I'll have the rest then. The stocky man spit on the ground next to her hand. Friday. If you don't have the full installment plus the penalty by Friday, we stop asking for the drive and start taking pieces of you until you remember where it is. Drayton looked at the canvas bag in the gutter. And stop bringing garbage home. It stinks up the neighborhood. He turned and walked away. The stocky man lingered for a second, glaring at Chloe before following his partner. They disappeared around the corner, fading into the dark veins of the Bronx as quickly as they had appeared. Nicholas sat in the SUV, his finger resting on the trigger guard of his weapon. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to get out, to hunt them down, to put 2 bullets in the base of their skulls for the disrespect alone. But he held back. Emotional kills were messy. If he acted now, he exposed himself. He exposed her. He needed to understand the full scope of the board before he moved his pieces. Chloe didn't move until the men were gone. Then she scrambled toward the gutter. She grabbed the canvas bag, pulling it into her lap. She ripped it open, frantically checking the contents. She pulled out the plastic container. It was battered, scratched, and covered in street slime. But the lid had held. The seal hadn't broken. She let out a sound that Nicholas could hear even through the rain, a sob of pure, ragged relief. She wiped the mud off the plastic with her sleeve, cradling the container against her chest. She stood up, her legs trembling, and limped toward the entrance of her building. She didn't care about the $42. She didn't care about the threat to her life. She cared about the leftovers. Nicholas waited until the front door of the tenement closed behind her. He unbuckled his seatbelt. The silence in the car was suddenly unbearable. He needed to see. He needed to verify the reality of what he was witnessing because it defied every logic he operated under. He opened the door and stepped out. The rain hit him like a physical blow, cold and sharp. He engaged the central lock of the SUV and crossed the street, his Italian leather boots splashing through the same puddles Chloe had traversed. He approached the building, bypassing the front door. He moved to the side, to the ground floor windows. The building was a rotting husk. The smell of mildew and stagnant water radiated from the brickwork. Nicholas found the window that corresponded to the unit Chloe had entered. The light had just flickered on inside. The blinds were cheap, plastic slats, bent and broken in places, offering a fractured view of the interior. Nicholas stood in the alley, water dripping from his hair, and peered through the gaps. The room was a testament to absolute destitution. The walls were painted a color that might have been cream once, but was now a stained, peeling yellow. There was no furniture, no table, no chairs, no television. In the corner sat a single twin mattress directly on the scratched floorboards. A cardboard box served as a nightstand. It wasn't minimalism. It was survivalism. Chloe was standing in the center of the room. She had shed her soaked coat and was using a towel to dry the plastic container she had rescued. She set it down on the cardboard box with extreme care. Nicholas watched as she peeled back the lid. The smell of the roast beef must have hit her then, because she closed her eyes and swayed slightly. She looked starving. The hollows of her cheeks seemed deeper in the harsh overhead light. She reached for a plastic fork sitting on the box. Nicholas felt a strange sense of anticipation. "Eat," he commanded silently. "Take what you stole. You earned it." But she didn't eat. A knock sounded, not at the main door, but at the wall shared with the neighboring apartment. It was a rhythmic, weak tapping. Chloe's head snapped up. She didn't look annoyed. She looked resigned. She put the fork down. She took a deep breath, slapped her cheeks lightly to bring color into them, and forced a smile onto her face. It was the most convincing fake smile Nicholas had ever seen. Bright, warm, and entirely hollow. She walked to the door and opened it. An elderly woman stood there, leaning heavily on a walker. She was skeletal, her skin like parchment paper stretched over brittle bones. She wore a faded nightgown and a shawl that looked moth-eaten. "Mrs. Moretti," Chloe said, her voice audible through the thin glass. It was soft, affectionate. "You're awake late." "The hunger wakes me, Kara," the old woman rasped. Her eyes, clouded with cataracts, drifted past Chloe to the cardboard box. Did you bring anything?" "The soup kitchen was closed today." "My legs. I couldn't make it to the church." Nicholas felt the chill of the rain seep into his bones, but it had nothing to do with the weather. Chloe looked at the container of food. It was a substantial amount, enough for 2 meals for her, enough to stop the shaking in her hands. She looked back at the old woman. "I did," Chloe said. There was no hesitation, no pause to calculate portions. "The chef, Mr. Ricchetti's chef, made too much again. Can you believe it? He was going to throw it all out." "Oh, thank God," Mrs. Moretti whispered. Chloe picked up the container. She walked over to the old woman. Nicholas watched, waiting for her to divide it, to keep half, to keep a few slices of beef for herself. She didn't. She pressed the entire container into the old woman's trembling hands. "Here. It's prime rib. Soft vegetables. You have to eat it all, okay? It won't keep till tomorrow without a fridge." The old woman clutched the warm plastic. "But you, Chloe, what about you? You work so hard. You're so thin." Chloe laughed. It was a light, airy sound that masked a desperate lie. "Me? Are you kidding? I ate at the mansion. We had lobster and risotto. I'm so full I could burst. I couldn't eat another bite if I tried." As she said it, Nicholas saw her hand subconsciously move to her stomach, pressing against it as if to silence a cramp. "Lobster," Mrs. Moretti echoed, her eyes wide. "Imagine that. You live like a princess there." "I do," Chloe lied. "Now go. Eat while it's warm." She gently guided the old woman back into the hallway and closed the door. The moment the latch clicked, the performance died. Chloe slumped against the door. The bright smile vanished, replaced by a mask of sheer agony. She slid down to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. She buried her face in her arms. She didn't cry. She was past crying. She just sat there, rocking slightly, in a room that contained absolutely nothing, having given away the only thing she possessed. Nicholas stood in the alley, paralyzed. He had spent his life dealing with transactionality. You give, you get. You take, you keep. Loyalty was bought with fear or money. Altruism was a myth, a mask people wore to hide an agenda. But this was a glitch in his worldview. She was being hunted by Albanians for a fortune she didn't have. She was working herself to the bone in his house. She was starving, and she had just given away her survival to a woman who could offer her absolutely nothing in return. She wasn't a thief. She was a martyr, and she was his. The thought slammed into his mind with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't a question anymore. It wasn't a debate about security clearance. The concept of her being a liability evaporated, replaced by a possessive volcanic rage. The idea that she, someone under his roof, someone who wore his family's crest on her uniform, however invisible, was living like this, was an insult to his name, and the fact that Drayton and his lackey had touched her, had pushed her into the mud. Nicholas turned away from the window. He couldn't watch her suffering anymore. It felt like an intrusion on something sacred. He walked back to the car, his stride long and aggressive. He didn't feel the rain. He felt only the cold, hard clarity of a decision made. He reached the SUV and yanked the door open, sliding into the driver's seat. He didn't start the engine immediately. He pulled his phone from the passenger seat. The screen glowed bright in the dark cabin. He dialed a number that was saved on speed dial. Ethan answered on the first ring. "Boss?" "I need a location trace on a crew," Nicholas said. His voice was calm, terrifyingly so. It was the voice he used when he ordered hits. "Albanians, operating in the South Bronx. One goes by the name Drayton, tall leather jacket. Partner is stocky, shaved head. Albanians," Ethan repeated, the sound of keyboard clacking starting immediately in the background. "They're bottom feeders, boss. Scavengers. Did they hit one of our shipments?" "They touched something of mine," Nicholas said. He looked through the rain-streaked windshield at the crumbling building where Chloe Evans sat on the floor of an empty room. "I want them found," Nicholas continued. "I want to know where they sleep. I want to know who they report to. And Ethan? Yeah? Find out who holds the paper on Chloe Evans' debt. I don't care if it's the Albanians, the banks, or the devil himself. Contact them. Tonight." "The cleaning girl?" Ethan paused, confused. "Boss, it's 3:30 in the morning. You want me to buy a Maid's debt?" "I want you to buy it all," Nicholas said, his eyes hard as flint. "Every cent. Principal, interest, penalties. Wire the funds. As of sunrise, she doesn't owe them a dime. She owes me." "Understood," Ethan said, the confusion replaced by professional obedience. "Consider it done." Nicholas hung up. He tossed the phone back onto the seat. He started the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the spot on the sidewalk where Chloe had fallen. He would not intervene tonight. He couldn't just walk in there and drag her out without terrifying her, or revealing that he had been stalking her. He needed to do this the right way, the Richetti way. Absolute control, absolute leverage. Tomorrow, she would walk into his office as a servant. She would walk out as something else entirely. He put the SUV in gear and pulled away from the curb, leaving the Bronx behind, but carrying the image of the woman in the empty room with him like a burning brand. The morning sun that filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse was deceptive. It was bright, crisp, and bathed the sprawling living space in a light that suggested a fresh start, hiding the fact that the city below was still drying out from a storm that had nearly drowned it hours before. Inside the Richetti residence, the silence was absolute. It was not the peaceful silence of a home at rest, but the heavy, expectant silence of a courtroom before the gavel falls. Nicholas Richetti stood by the window in his private study, a mug of black coffee cooling in his hand. He hadn't slept. After leaving the Bronx, he had returned to the penthouse, showered the smell of rain and exhaust from his skin, and spent the remaining hours of darkness orchestrating a financial hostile takeover of a very specific, very small target. His phone buzzed on the obsidian desk. A single message from Ethan. Transaction complete. Wire confirmed. The paper is ours. Nicholas set the mug down. He didn't smile. Satisfaction was a dangerous emotion. It led to complacency. This wasn't a victory yet. It was merely the acquisition of a distressed asset. He adjusted the cuffs of his shirt. He had chosen charcoal gray today, severe and authoritative. He needed to be the wall she hit, not the pillow she landed on. He pressed the intercom button on his desk. Send her in. He didn't need to specify who. Ethan, who was waiting in the hallway, knew exactly who the meeting was with. A moment later, the heavy mahogany doors opened. Chloe Evans stepped inside. If Nicholas had expected her to look better after a few hours away from the rain, he was mistaken. She looked like a ghost haunting her own life. Her uniform was pressed, her hair pulled back into that severe, self-effacing bun, but the fatigue was etched into the pale skin beneath her eyes. Her hands were clasped in front of her, the knuckles white. She didn't look at the room, at the millions of dollars of art on the walls, or the view that commanded the skyline. She looked at the floor, then forced her chin up to look at him. She expected to be fired. Nicholas could read the resignation in her posture. She thought she had been caught stealing leftovers, and in her world, that was a capital offense. She was bracing for the severance speech, the demand for her keycard, and the escort out of the building. "Mr. Richetti," she said. Her voice was steady, but brittle. "You asked to see me?" "Close the door, Chloe." She hesitated, then pushed the heavy wood until it clicked shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the large room. She walked forward, stopping a respectful distance from the desk, maintaining the invisible barrier that separated the staff from the employer. Nicholas didn't sit. He walked around the desk, leaning against the edge of it, crossing his arms. He wanted to remove the physical barrier of the furniture, not to make her comfortable, but to make her feel exposed. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked. I assume it's about last night," she said, her gaze flickering to his for a second before dropping again. "The food. I know it's against policy to take anything from the premises. I deeply apologize. It won't happen again. I can pay for the ingredients out of my next paycheck if you— I don't care about the beef, Chloe." The interruption stopped her mid-apology. She blinked, confused. "Sir? I don't care about the carrots. I don't care about the plastic container you fished out of the recycling bin," Nicholas said, his voice low and devoid of inflection. "I care about the fact that my employee, who has passed a highest-level security clearance, was cornered by 2 Albanian enforcers on a street corner in the Bronx at 3:00 a.m. The color drained from Chloe's face so fast Nicholas thought she might faint. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The professional mask shattered, revealing the terrified woman beneath. "How?" she whispered. "How do you know that? I make it my business to know where my liabilities lie." Nicholas lied smoothly. He wasn't going to tell her he had stalked her bus like a jealous ex-lover. He needed to be omniscient. "And you, Chloe, are a massive liability." He picked up a file folder from the desk and tossed it toward her. It slid across the polished black stone, stopping inches from her hand. "Open it." Chloe reached out, her fingers trembling. She opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a transfer deed, a complex financial document that detailed the purchase of a debt obligation. $150,000. Nicholas recited the number as she read it. "Inherited from your father, Peter Evans. A gambling debt initially held by a bookie in Queens, then sold to the Dritten crew when the interest compounded beyond your ability to pay. You've been paying them 80% of your take-home pay for 2 years. At the current interest rate, you would have been paying them until you were 60, assuming they didn't kill you first." Chloe stared at the paper. The numbers were familiar nightmares to her, but the name at the bottom, the holder of the note, had changed. It no longer said Tirana Holdings LLC, the shell company the Albanians used. It said Richetti Global Ventures. She looked up, her green eyes wide with a panic that was bordering on hysteria. You bought it? I did. Why? The word tore out of her throat. Why would you do that? Because the Drayton crew is sloppy, Nicholas said, pushing off the desk and taking a step toward her. They are loud. They are violent. And last night they put their hands on you. You work for me, Chloe. Nobody touches what belongs to me. He saw the flinch when he said, belongs to me. He ignored it. He needed her to understand the new reality. I contacted their leadership this morning, Nicholas continued. The debt has been settled in full. You no longer owe the Albanians a single cent. Drayton has been informed that if he or any of his associates come within 500 yards of you, it will be considered an act of war against the Richetti family. For a second, the relief on her face was palpable. The crushing weight of the thugs, the fear of the late-night knock on the door, the physical threat. It was gone. But then the second realization hit her. The debt wasn't gone. It had just moved. She looked at him, and the fear returned. Different this time. Sharper. So I owe you, she said quietly. I owe you $150,000, plus the administrative fees for the transfer, Nicholas added coldly. Yes. Chloe swallowed hard. She straightened her spine. It was a reflexive movement, a gathering of dignity in the face of disaster. I can't pay you the lump sum, obviously, but I can continue the payment plan I had with them. I can give you the cash every Friday. No, sir, I promise I'm good for it. I've never missed a week. I don't want your cash, Chloe, Nicholas said. I don't need your $40 in tips. It's insulting to both of us. Then what do you want? Nicholas walked around her, circling her like a shark. I want security. A compromised employee is a danger to my operation. Living in a tenement in the Bronx, vulnerable to extortion, starving yourself, that makes you weak. I don't employ weak people. He stopped in front of her. Here are the new terms of your employment. Effective immediately, your salary is tripled. Chloe's head snapped up. Tripled. It will be deducted directly from your debt, Nicholas clarified. You will not handle the money. It goes from payroll to the ledger. This will pay off the principal in 3 years, not 30. Furthermore, you are evicted from your current apartment. What? You will live here, Nicholas said, gesturing to the ceiling. The staff quarters in the East Wing are empty. You will move in today. You will be provided with 3 meals a day by the kitchen staff. Fresh meals, Chloe, not garbage from the bin. You will have security. You will have a safe place to sleep. In exchange, you are available to me 24/7. If I need the library cleaned at midnight, you clean it. If I need coffee at 4 a.m., you brew it. You belong to the house until the debt is cleared. He waited for the gratitude. It was a golden cage, yes, but it was a palace compared to the hell she was living in. He was offering her safety, food, and a way out of the hole her father had dug. But Chloe didn't say thank you. She stepped back, shaking her head. I can't. Nicholas frowned. The refusal was unexpected. Excuse me? I can't accept, Chloe said, her voice shaking but firm. I can't live here. Nicholas felt a spark of irritation. Was she stupid? Did you not hear me? I just offered you a life raft. You prefer the gutter? It's not about me, Chloe cried out, the professional veneer cracking completely. I can't leave. If I move in here, if I'm locked in here 24/7, who takes care of her? Nicholas went still. Her? Mrs. Moretti, Chloe said, tears welling in her eyes. My neighbor, she's 82. She can't walk to the store. She can't cook. Her son died 5 years ago. She has no one. I'm the one who brings her food. I'm the one who helps her with her medication. She took a breath, a ragged sound. Last night, the food I took, it wasn't for me. It was for her. I can't leave her alone in that building. She'll starve, or she'll fall and no one will find her for days. I can't do that. I won't do that. Not even for safety, not even for the money. She looked at him with a fierce, desperate defiance. If the condition is that I have to abandon her, then I choose the debt. I'll take my chances with Drayton. Nicholas stared at her. He had expected negotiation. He had expected relief. He had not expected this. She was rejecting $1 million lifestyle and safety from killers because an old woman she wasn't related to needed help with groceries. It was the most irrational, inefficient, and utterly noble thing he had ever heard. The irritation vanished, replaced by a strange warmth in his chest that he recognized from the night before. He had been right about her. She wasn't just staff. She was rare. He walked back to his desk. He picked up his phone. "I know," he said softly. Chloe blinked, wiping a tear from her cheek. You know? I know the food was for her," Nicholas said. He tapped the screen of his phone and turned it around to face her. "And I know that she prefers oatmeal for breakfast." Chloe froze. She looked at the screen. It was a video feed. A high-resolution clip taken from a cell phone, likely recorded only an hour ago. It showed the hallway of her tenement building. The door to Mrs. Moretti's apartment was open. Inside, the old woman was sitting at a small table Nicholas hadn't seen the night before. Someone must have brought it in. There were bags of groceries on the floor. A man in scrubs, a nurse, was checking her blood pressure. "Mrs. Moretti," the nurse was saying in the video, his voice clear. "Mr. Ricchetti has arranged for a delivery service to bring your meals twice a day, and I'll be stopping by every morning to check your vitals and manage your prescriptions. Everything is paid for." The old woman in the video looked confused but beamed. "Chloe sent you? She's such a good girl." "Yes," the nurse said. "Chloe arranged everything." Nicholas tapped the screen, pausing the video. He looked at Chloe. She was staring at the frozen image of her neighbor, safe, fed, and attended to. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked from the phone to Nicholas, her expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and finally, a profound, shattering realization. "You," she stammered. "You sent people there?" "This morning, I solve problems, Chloe," Nicholas said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming intimate in the vast room. "You were worried about the neighbor. That was the obstacle preventing you from being effective for me. So I removed the obstacle. Mrs. Moretti has a full-time care plan, paid for 6 months in advance. She is safer now than she ever was with you bringing her scraps." He set the phone down. "Now," he said, "are there any other reasons why you cannot accept my terms?" Chloe stood there for a long moment. The fight went out of her. The tension that had been holding her upright seemed to dissolve, leaving her looking smaller, but lighter. She looked at Nicholas, really looked at him, not as the terrifying boss, but as the man who had seen the one thing she cared about more than herself and protected it. She took a step forward. She didn't bow. She didn't cower. "No," she whispered. "No other reasons." She took a deep breath, and her eyes locked onto his. They were wet, glassy with unshed tears, but clear. "Thank you," she said. The words hung in the air. It wasn't the polite "thank you" of a servant accepting an order. It was raw. It was the sound of a person who had been drowning for years, finally feeling the ground beneath their feet. "Thank you for saving me," she added, her voice cracking slightly. "And thank you for saving her. Nobody has ever done anything like that for me." Nicholas felt a muscle in his jaw twitch. He wasn't used to gratitude. He was used to fear, respect, and transaction. This felt different. It felt heavy. "It's an investment," he said roughly, looking away, breaking the intensity of her gaze. He needed to reassert the boundaries. "I protect my assets. Don't read into it." "I will work," Chloe said, ignoring his deflection. "I will work until every cent is paid. I promise you. You won't regret this." "I better not," Nicholas said. He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Ethan will show you to your quarters. You start immediately. Go pack your things from the apartment. Take a security team with you. Do not go alone." "Yes, sir." Chloe turned to leave. At the door, she paused. She looked back at him, her hand on the brass handle. She looked different than she had 5 minutes ago. The haunted look was gone, replaced by a quiet, fierce determination. "I won't let you down, Nicholas," she said. She slipped out before he could correct her for using his first name. Nicholas stood alone in the silence of his office. He looked at the closed door. He picked up his coffee, which was now cold. He drank it anyway. He had bought her debt to own her, to control the variable. That was the logic. That was the strategy. But as he replayed the way she had looked at the video of the old woman, and the sound of her voice when she said, "Thank you," he had the unsettling suspicion that the transaction wasn't as one-sided as he thought. He had brought her into his house to keep her under his thumb, but he had a feeling that having Chloe Evans under his roof was going to be infinitely more dangerous than having her on the street. He sat down at his desk and pulled up the security feed of the hallway. He watched her walking toward the elevators with Ethan. She was walking taller. "Make it worth it," he whispered to the screen. He turned back to his work, but the numbers on the screen blurred. For the first time in years, the silence of the penthouse didn't feel empty. It felt like the calm before a very different kind of storm. The transition from the tenement in the Bronx to the east wing of the Ricchetti penthouse was jarring, not because of the luxury, but because of the silence. For a week, Chloe Evans had lived in a world of muted tones and hushed footsteps. The constant grinding noise of poverty, the sirens, the shouting neighbors, the rattle of the radiator, was gone, replaced by the hum of central air and the terrifying quiet of a house that held too many secrets. Chloe did not treat this new life as a vacation. She treated it as a deployment. Nicholas had bought her debt. He had tripled her salary. He had ensured Mrs. Moretti was safe. In exchange, he demanded ownership of her time. Chloe gave it to him with a ferocity that bordered on obsession. She was awake at 5 a.m., pressing his shirts before the dry cleaners even opened. She was in the library at midnight, organizing books by subject and author, ensuring the spines were perfectly aligned. She scrubbed, she polished, and she organized, driven by a paralyzing fear that if she stopped being useful for even a second, the debt would swallow her whole again. Nicholas watched her. He didn't say much. He was a man who communicated in directives and silence. He would sit at the head of the long dining table, reading reports on his tablet while she poured his coffee, his dark eyes tracking her movement. He noticed that she moved differently now. The hunch of desperation was gone, replaced by a stiff, military-grade efficiency. She wasn't starving anymore. The chef fed her 3 balanced meals a day. But she ate quickly, as if she expected the plate to be snatched away. It was Tuesday evening, 7 days after she had moved in. The storm that had brought them together was a distant memory, replaced by the humid heat of a New York summer. Nicholas was in his home office, the nerve center of his empire. The room was a disaster of paper. For a man who prided himself on control, his physical filing system was archaic. He didn't trust the cloud with his most sensitive financial data. He trusted paper, which could be burned. But right now, the paper was winning. "Chloe," he said into the intercom. She appeared in the doorway less than 30 seconds later. She was wearing the uniform, a crisp black dress today, not the gray one, and her hands were clasped behind her back. "Yes, Mr. Ricchetti? I need this cleared," Nicholas said, gesturing to a stack of boxes near the shredder. "These are financial records from the chaotic quarter of 2021. The statute of limitations for my internal audits has passed. I want them shredded, cross-cut, every single page." It was a menial task, a mindless task. It was beneath the intelligence he suspected she possessed, but he needed to clear the space, and he needed to see if she would complain. "Understood," Chloe said. She didn't sigh. She didn't roll her eyes. She walked over to the boxes, knelt down, and began the work. Nicholas returned to his screens. He was still hunting for the 3%. The discrepancy that had started this whole chain of events was still there, mocking him. He had fired the logistics manager in New Jersey, thinking it was incompetence. But the numbers hadn't corrected themselves. Someone was siphoning money from his accounts with a method so subtle it was practically invisible. The rhythmic whir crunch of the shredder filled the room. It was a white noise that usually helped him concentrate. But tonight, the rhythm was off. He glanced over. Chloe had stopped shredding. She was kneeling on the Persian rug, holding a stack of documents in her hands. She wasn't feeding them into the machine. She was spreading them out on the floor, arranging them in a grid. Nicholas watched, his irritation rising. "Chloe, the machine works by feeding the paper into the slot, not by wallpapering my floor." She didn't look up. Her eyes were darting back and forth between 3 different spreadsheets from 3 different months. Her finger traced a line in the air, connecting invisible dots. "Mr. Richetti," she said, her voice distracted. "Who designs your internal ledger templates?" Nicholas blinked. "What?" "The layout," she said, finally looking up. Her green eyes were sharp, focused in a way he hadn't seen before. "The visual structure of the columns. Who formatted this?" "I have no idea," Nicholas said, swiveling his chair to face her completely. "The accounting department uses standard software." "Why?" "Because it's wrong," Chloe said. She picked up 2 sheets of paper and walked toward his desk. Nicholas tensed. He didn't like staff approaching the desk when he had active operations on the screen. He minimized the window. "It's a spreadsheet, Chloe. It's numbers. It's not supposed to be art." "It's not about art. It's about spacing," she said, placing the papers down in front of him. She pointed to a column of transaction dates and amounts. "Look at the kerning." "The what?" "The kerning. The space between the characters." She tapped the paper. "I was a graphic designer for 4 years before everything happened. My eyes are trained to see negative space. Look at this entry for January 14th, and this one for February 20th, and this one for March 29th. Nicholas looked. He saw numbers. They look like numbers. "No," Chloe insisted, her finger tracing the line. "The font here is Arial, size 11. But these specific entries, the ones I pointed out, they are Arial, size 11.5. It's a microscopic difference. To a normal eye, it just looks like the ink bled a little, or the printer was dirty. But it's not ink bleed. It's digital." She grabbed a 3rd sheet. "I saw the pattern on the floor. It's visual rhythm. These slightly larger entries, they aren't random. They appear in a sequence. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. Nicholas frowned. "The Fibonacci sequence." "Exactly," Chloe said. "Whoever is inputting this data is using a slightly modified font size to tag specific transactions. It's a marker. A visual code that wouldn't show up in a mathematical audit because the numbers themselves balance out in the grand total. But visually, it's screaming." Nicholas felt a cold chill slide down his spine. He pulled the papers closer. He looked at the entries she had identified. January 14th, a payment to a shell company for consulting. February 20th, another payment, slightly larger. "If you add up only the transactions with the size 11.5 font," Chloe said, her voice gaining confidence, "I bet you'll find you're missing money." Nicholas didn't speak. He grabbed his keyboard. He pulled up the master file for 2021. He didn't look at the math. He looked at the metadata of the font rendering. It took him 3 minutes of rapid typing to run a script that isolated the font irregularities. The screen populated a list. Total value of flagged transactions, $4.2 million. Nicholas sat back in his chair. The leather creaked loudly in the silent room. He stared at the number. He had spent weeks looking for a mathematical error, a hacking intrusion, a mole transferring funds. He hadn't found it because the thief hadn't changed the numbers. They had simply hidden the theft in plain sight, using a visual trick that only someone obsessed with typography would notice. He looked up at Chloe. She was standing there, hands clasped again, looking slightly terrified that she had overstepped. She was a maid. She was supposed to be shredding this evidence, not analyzing it. "You found it," Nicholas said softly. "My team of forensic accountants, who cost me $50,000 a month, missed this. And you found it while trying to destroy the paper. It just looked unbalanced," Chloe murmured. "Bad design always catches my eye. It creates tension on the page." Nicholas stood up. He walked around the desk. He stopped in front of her, forcing her to look up at him. "You were a designer?" he asked. "A professional?" "Senior designer at Sterling & Cooper," Chloe said, a ghost of pride entering her voice. "I was up for art director before my father got sick. Then the debt. I couldn't keep the job and work the extra shifts I needed to pay the interest. I lost my portfolio. I lost everything." Nicholas looked at her hands that he had watched scrub toilets and scrape leftovers. hands that had just solved a $4 million puzzle because they knew the difference between font sizes. "You are wasting your time," Nicholas said. Chloe flinched. "I'm sorry. I'll go back to the shredder." "No," Nicholas said sharply. "You are wasting your time cleaning my house." He turned and walked to the wall safe hidden behind a panel of oak. He punched in the code and pulled out a sleek black laptop. It was a secure terminal, military-grade encryption, worth more than the entire building she used to live in. He walked back and held it out to her. "Take it." Chloe stared at the device. "Sir? This is yours now," Nicholas ordered. "You are done with the uniform. You are done with the shredder. As of this moment, your role in this household has changed." "Changed to what?" "Analyst," Nicholas said. "I have 5 years of financial records that need to be visually scrubbed. If they used this trick in 2021, they used it elsewhere. I want you to go through everything, every ledger, every invoice, every shipping manifest. You find the patterns. You find the bad design." Chloe reached out and took the laptop. It was heavy in her hands. It felt like a weapon. It felt like a lifeline. I can do that," she whispered. "I can definitely do that." "Good," Nicholas said. He checked his watch. It was 8 p.m. "Have you eaten?" "No, sir. I was waiting to finish the filing." Nicholas pressed the intercom button. "Chef, send up dinner. For 2, in the office." He paused. "What do you want, Chloe? And don't say salad." Chloe looked at him, surprised by the question. The adrenaline of the discovery was still coursing through her veins, making her bold. "A cheeseburger," she said. "A real one. With bacon." Nicholas's lips twitched. It was almost a smile. 2 bacon cheeseburgers. "And fries. Bring a bottle of the 96 Barolo." He cut the connection. "Sit," Nicholas said, pointing to the leather chair opposite his desk. The chair reserved for capos and business partners. Chloe sat. She placed the laptop on her lap, her fingers brushing the matte metal surface. She looked like someone who had been holding her breath for years and had finally been given permission to exhale. "My father," Chloe said into the silence, her voice quiet. "He wasn't just a gambler. He was a coder. He taught me to look for patterns in the chaos. He used to say that the world is just data waiting to be organized." Nicholas sat on the edge of his desk, looking down at her. "He taught you well. It's a shame he didn't apply that logic to his own finances." "He tried," Chloe defended him, though the anger was gone. He saw patterns that weren't there. He thought he could beat the system." "You can't beat the system," Nicholas said. "You can only own it." The food arrived 20 minutes later, carried by a confused-looking server who wasn't used to seeing the maid sitting in the client chair. Nicholas dismissed him with a wave. They ate in the office, surrounded by the smell of old paper and expensive wine. It was a surreal tableau. The Mafia Don and the cleaning lady, eating burgers with their hands while a $4 million theft lay exposed on the desk between them. "This Fibonacci trick," Nicholas said, dipping a fry into ketchup. "It suggests the thief is educated. This isn't a thug skimming cash. This is someone who went to art school or engineering school. Or someone who loves puzzles," Chloe said. She took a sip of the wine, her eyes widening at the taste. "The spacing, it's elegant, in a twisted way. It's almost a signature. If I can isolate the specific kerning adjustment, I can build a filter to scan all your future documents automatically. You won't need me to look at every page. I'll decide what I need," Nicholas said. His voice dropped, becoming serious. "You have a talent, Chloe. A dangerous one. In my world, people kill for the kind of insight you just provided. You need to understand that by doing this, by finding this money, you are putting a target on your back. The person who stole this? They are likely someone inside my organization. Someone close." Chloe stopped chewing. She put the burger down. "I didn't think of that." "You don't have to," Nicholas said. "That's my job. I handle the threats. You handle the data." He looked at her, really looked at her. In the soft light of the office, with a smudge of ketchup on her thumb and her eyes bright with intellectual stimulation, she looked different. The fragile, broken bird he had rescued from the rain was gone. In her place was a woman with a sharp mind and a spine of steel. Why? Chloe asked suddenly. Why what? Why trust me? She asked. I'm nobody. I'm a debtor. I could use this information against you. I could take that $4 million discovery and try to sell it to the thief. Nicholas laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. You could, but you won't. How do you know? Because you starve yourself to feed an old woman, Nicholas said simply. And because when you found the error, your first instinct wasn't to leverage it, but to fix it. You crave order, Chloe. Just like I do. You aren't built for betrayal. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. The person who did this, he said, gesturing to the papers, is going to pay. And when they do, you'll be the one who handed me the gun. Chloe shivered, but it wasn't from fear. It was from a sense of purpose. For 2 years she had been a victim, a pawn in her father's mistakes, a slave to the interest rates of criminals. Tonight, for the first time, she was a player in the game. I'll find them, Chloe said. She opened the laptop, the screen illuminating her face with a blue glow. Give me the passwords. I want to start on 2022. Nicholas turned back to her. The admiration in his eyes was unguarded now. It wasn't sexual, though the undercurrent was there, a hum of tension that filled the room. It was the appreciation of one predator recognizing the sharp teeth of another. The password, Nicholas said, is Omerta. Chloe typed it in. The system unlocked. Welcome to the family business, Chloe, Nicholas said. She didn't look up. She was already scrolling, her eyes scanning the columns of data, hunting for the rhythm, hunting for the bad design, hunting for the enemies of the man who had saved her life. Nicholas went back to his desk, but he didn't work. He watched her. He watched the way she bit her lip when she concentrated. He watched the way her fingers flew across the trackpad. He realized with a start that he wasn't just observing an employee. He was observing a partner, and the realization terrified him more than any assassin ever could. Because partners were weaknesses. Partners were people you couldn't afford to lose. Chloe, he said. She paused, looking up. Yes? The blue dress, he said. The uniform. Burn it. Sir? You don't wear a uniform anymore, Nicholas said firmly. Tomorrow you go shopping. Buy clothes that fit your new station. Buy clothes that make you feel like the woman who just outsmarted my entire accounting department. Chloe touched the collar of her dress self-consciously. Okay. And Chloe? Yes? Get the green one, Nicholas said, his voice low. The color you were wearing in your head when you stared at those numbers. It suits you. He didn't know how he knew that color would suit her. He just knew. Chloe smiled. It was the first real, genuine smile he had seen on her face since the night in the rain. Green. Got it. She went back to work. Nicholas poured himself another glass of wine, the taste rich and heavy on his tongue. The storm had passed, but the air in the penthouse was crackling with electricity. He had found the thief in his ledgers, but he had found something far more dangerous in his office. He had found a reason to care. The dress lay on the bed like a pool of liquid emeralds. It was a garment that didn't just suggest wealth, it screamed it. The fabric was a heavy, vintage silk that caught the light with every subtle movement, shifting from deep forest green to a vibrant, piercing jade. It had long sleeves, a high neck that spoke of modesty, and a back that plunged dangerously low. A deliberate contradiction designed to confuse and captivate. Chloe stood in the center of her new bedroom in the East Wing, staring at it. It had been 3 days since Nicholas had handed her the laptop and the password Omerta. 3 days of burying herself in digital archives, hunting for the ghost in the machine. She had found more patterns, more font irregularities, more siphoned funds. She felt useful. She felt safe. But tonight, Nicholas didn't need an analyst. He needed a prop. It's a charity auction for the Metropolitan Arts Council, he had told her an hour ago, leaning against the doorframe of her makeshift office while she rubbed her tired eyes. I need to acquire a specific 17th century landscape. I also need to ensure I'm not buying a forgery. You have the eye. You're coming. It wasn't a request. Chloe reached out and touched the silk. It was cool against her fingertips. She shed the cashmere sweater and leggings she had been living in, the uniform of the invisible worker, and slipped into the dress. It fit with the terrifying precision of something made to measure, though she had never been measured. Nicholas's attention to detail was, as always, absolute. She walked to the full-length mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger. The dress hugged her ribs and flared slightly at the hips, the emerald color making her green eyes blaze with an intensity that startled even her. She looked dangerous. She looked like she belonged in the penthouse, not as someone who cleaned it, but as someone who could rule it. She pinned her hair up, leaving a few strands loose to frame her face, applied a coat of dark red lipstick that she found in the vanity, brand new, seal unbroken, and stepped into the black stilettos waiting on the floor. She opened the door and walked down the hallway. Nicholas was waiting for her in the foyer. He was adjusting the cuffs of his tuxedo, his back to her. He looked devastatingly severe in black tie, a monolith of dark fabric and sharp lines. He heard her heels on the marble and turned. He stopped, his hands stilled on his cuffs. His eyes, usually so guarded and restless, locked onto her and stayed there. He didn't smile. He didn't leer. He looked at her with the clinical, intense appreciation of a man who had commissioned a masterpiece and was seeing it unveiled for the first time. "Green," he said softly, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged space. "I was right." Chloe stopped a few feet away from him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "It fits. Of course it fits," Nicholas replied, recovering his composure. He walked toward her, the scent of sandalwood and expensive scotch moving with him. He stopped close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "You look adequate for the mission." "High praise," Chloe murmured, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "We aren't going there to socialize, Chloe," Nicholas said, his tone shifting back to business, though his eyes lingered on the curve of her neck. "The auction is a front. The people attending are the sharks of the city. Politicians, laundering experts, rival capos pretending to be philanthropists. You stay by my side. You speak only when asked about the art. You are my eyes on the canvas, nothing else. Do you understand?" "I understand," she said. "I'm the lens. You're the trigger." Nicholas's lips quirked. "Something like that." He offered her his arm. She took it. The muscle beneath the tuxedo jacket was rock hard. They took the private elevator down to the garage. The black armored SUV was waiting, engine idling. Ethan was in the driver's seat today, looking grim. Nicholas opened the rear door for her, helping her in with a hand on the small of her back, a touch that burned through the silk, before sliding in beside her. The door sealed with a heavy, pressurized thud that shut out the world. "The Pierre Hotel," Nicholas ordered. The car moved out into the city night. It wasn't raining tonight, but the air was thick with humidity, a heavy blanket that trapped the heat of the day against the asphalt. The city lights smeared across the tinted bulletproof windows. Inside the cabin, the tension was palpable. Chloe sat stiffly, careful not to wrinkle the silk. Nicholas was typing on his phone, his thumb moving rapidly. "The Fibonacci patterns," he said without looking up. "You found another cluster in the 2022 logistics file." "Yes," Chloe said, grateful for the familiar ground of data. "March and April, large transfers disguised as fuel surcharges. The kerning on the invoices was off by 0.5 points again. It's the same person." "It's impressive," Nicholas admitted, finally putting the phone away. "Most people look at a spreadsheet and see math. You look at it and see architecture. My father used to say that code is just poetry written in logic." Chloe said quietly, "If the rhythm is off, the poem is bad. If the kerning is off, the ledger is a lie." "Your father was a complicated man," Nicholas said. He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the shifting shadows of the passing streetlights. "He stole from dangerous people, but he taught you how to catch them. I suppose I should be grateful for his contradictions." "I just want to find who is doing this to you," Chloe said. "I want to finish the job." "You will," Nicholas promised. "And when you do," he was cut off by a violent impact. The world spun. The heavy SUV shuddered as something massive slammed into the rear passenger side. Metal screamed against metal, a horrific, grinding shriek that vibrated through Chloe's bones. The car skidded sideways, tires screeching in protest, the heavy armor preventing it from flipping, but doing nothing to stop the momentum. "Down!" Nicholas roared. His arm shot out across her chest, pinning her back against the leather seat as the SUV slammed into a concrete divider. The airbag didn't deploy. Nicholas had disabled them in the rear for tactical reasons, but the force of the stop snapped Chloe's head forward. "Ethan!" Nicholas barked. "Blocked!" Ethan shouted from the front. 2 SUVs, rear and flank, were boxed in. Chloe looked out the window. Through the spiderweb cracks of the reinforced glass, she saw blinding high beams. 2 massive black trucks had pinned them against the wall of a tunnel entrance. They weren't moving. They were trapping. "Is it a hit?" Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. "It's an extraction," Nicholas said grimly. He reached under the seat and pulled out a submachine gun, a compact, lethal MP5. He checked the magazine with a practiced, terrifying calm. "If they wanted us dead, they would have used a bomb or a sniper. They want something alive inside this car." The phone in the center console began to ring. It wasn't Nicholas's cell phone. It was the car phone, a secure line that only a handful of people had the number for. The sound was shrill and jarring in the sudden silence of the cabin. Nicholas stared at it. The caller ID was blocked. "Answer it," Nicholas commanded Ethan. "Speaker." Ethan pressed the button. "Richetti!" A voice rasped through the speakers. It was a voice Chloe recognized instantly. It was the voice of the nightmare she thought she had escaped. "Drayton, you drive a hard shell, Nicholas," the Albanian said. He sounded amused, arrogant. "But shells can be cracked. You're making a mistake, Drayton," Nicholas said, his voice level, betraying zero fear. "You are currently holding a made man of the Cosa Nostra in a tunnel. The reprisal will wipe your entire bloodline off the map." "Save the speeches," Drayton spat. "We aren't here for a turf war. We know about the transaction. We know you bought the girl's debt." Chloe stopped breathing. She pressed herself deeper into the leather seat. "I bought the debt," Nicholas said. "Which means she is mine. You have your money. Go home." "We have the money, yes," Drayton laughed darkly, "but we aren't stupid. Why would Nicholas Richetti, the Wolf of Manhattan, pay $150,000 for a cleaning lady? Is she that good in bed? I doubt it. Careful," Nicholas warned, a low growl. "No, you bought her because she gave it to you," Drayton said. "The drive, the master key. Her father stole the encryption keys to our offshore accounts 3 years ago. We couldn't find them. We figured he died with the secret. But then you show up, buy the daughter, and suddenly you're paying off her debts? You have the key, and she knows how to use it." Chloe's eyes widened. "I don't," she whispered to Nicholas. "I don't have it." Nicholas ignored her, keeping his focus on the phone. "You're imagining things, Drayton." "Am I?" Drayton countered. "Give us the girl. Send her out. We take her, we find out where the key is, and you drive away to your party. Refuse, and we burn you inside that can. Come and get her," Nicholas said. He shot the console, destroying the phone. The line went dead. "He thinks I have it," Chloe said, panic rising in her throat. "He thinks my father gave me a drive. Nicholas, I swear I never saw a drive. I searched the apartment 1,000 times. "I know," Nicholas said. He turned to her. His face was hard, focused. The face of a soldier. "Listen to me. The glass will hold for about 60 seconds against sledgehammers or small arms. They are going to try to breach the doors. I need you on the floor. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to kill them," Nicholas said simply. He looked at Ethan. "On my mark. Pop the trunk release. It will distract the rear team. We exit passenger side. Rolling formation." "Yes, boss." "Chloe." Nicholas grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Stay behind me. If I move left, you move left. If I drop, you drop. Do not freeze. Do you understand? You are not a civilian tonight. You are my shadow." "I understand," she managed to say. Outside, men were pouring out of the SUVs. They were wearing balaclavas and carrying assault rifles. One of them had a breaching tool, a heavy battering ram. "Now," Nicholas yelled, Ethan hit the trunk release. The rear hatch of the SUV popped open with a hiss. The men behind the car flinched, raising their weapons toward the trunk, expecting a gunman. It was a feint. Nicholas kicked the rear passenger door open. It swung out, heavy as a bank vault door, knocking the closest Albanian backward. Nicholas rolled out onto the asphalt, the MP5 barking a controlled burst of fire. Pop, pop, pop. The man with the battering ram dropped, clutching his leg. Move! Nicholas grabbed Chloe's hand and pulled her out. The humidity of the night hit her, thick with the smell of exhaust and cordite. The noise was deafening. Gunfire erupted from the front SUV, bullets sparking against the armored plating of Nicholas's car. They were crouched behind the engine block of the SUV. Ethan was on the other side, providing suppressing fire with a handgun. "They're flanking right," Ethan shouted. Nicholas spun, firing over the hood. He took down a man trying to rush them, but there were too many of them, at least 8. Chloe crouched in her emerald silk, the asphalt digging into her knees. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like a continuous vibration. She looked under the chassis of the SUV. She saw boots. Shadows moving against the tunnel lights. She saw a pair of boots moving silently around the rear, coming up on Nicholas's blind side while he engaged the front targets. Nicholas was reloading. He didn't see them. "Nicholas, 3 o'clock," Chloe screamed, pointing. She didn't freeze. She didn't cover her ears. She analyzed the visual data, the boots, the shadow, the angle, and she relayed it. Nicholas didn't hesitate. He didn't look to verify. He trusted her voice. He dropped to one knee, spun 90 degrees, and fired blindly around the corner of the bumper. A man yelled in pain and collapsed, his weapon clattering to the ground just feet from where they were huddled. "Good call," Nicholas grunted, slapping a fresh magazine into his weapon. "Ethan, suppress the front. We're pushing to the service door." He grabbed Chloe's waist, hauling her up. "Run! Now!" They sprinted toward a metal maintenance door set into the concrete wall of the tunnel, 10 yards away. Bullets whizzed past them, angry hornets of lead. One chipped the concrete inches from Chloe's face, dusting her hair with gray powder. Nicholas shoved her toward the door. He turned, firing a covering burst that forced the Albanians to duck behind their vehicles. He reached the door, kicked the lock with a brutal, precise force, and shoulder-checked it open. He threw Chloe inside and dove after her, slamming the heavy steel door shut and throwing the deadbolt. Sudden silence. They were in a maintenance corridor, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes. The sound of shouting and gunfire was muffled now, distant. Nicholas leaned back against the door, his chest heaving. He checked his weapon. Empty. He pulled a handgun from his tuxedo waistband. He looked at Chloe. She was standing in the middle of the hallway. The emerald dress was ruined, torn at the hem, stained with grease from the car door, and covered in concrete dust. Her hair had come loose, falling in wild waves around her face. She was trembling, the adrenaline crash beginning to hit. But she was alive, and she hadn't screamed. Nicholas holstered his gun and walked over to her. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip bruising. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his eyes scanning her body for blood. "Check yourself. Adrenaline hides the pain. Are you hit?" Chloe looked down at herself. She ran her hands over her ribs, her legs. No, I'm okay. She looked up at him. "You shot them. They were trying to take you," Nicholas said, his voice raw. "I would burn the whole city before I let them put you in a van." "They think I have the key," Chloe said, her voice shaking. "Nicholas," Drayton said, "he said my father stole the encryption keys. He said that's why you bought me." "He's wrong," Nicholas said firmly. "I bought you because I wanted you. But the key..." Chloe's eyes darted around the hallway, her mind racing, connecting dots that she hadn't seen before. "My father. He didn't leave a drive. He knew they would tear the apartment apart. He knew they would check my bags. He never used hardware. He hated hardware. Chloe, focus. We need to move." "No, wait." She grabbed his lapels, pulling him closer. Her eyes were manic, brilliant. "The paintings, in the basement, the ones I brought from the apartment." Nicholas frowned. "The canvases? The ugly, abstract ones?" He painted them, Chloe said breathlessly. He started painting them 6 months before he died. He said it was therapy, but he was terrible at art. He was a coder. He was obsessed with layers. She looked at Nicholas, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Steganography, she whispered, hiding data inside images, the patterns, the brushstrokes. He didn't leave a drive. He painted the code, the key to the Albanian accounts. It's hanging on the wall in your basement. Nicholas stared at her. The gunfire outside had stopped. Sirens were approaching. The police were coming. But the real bomb had just been dropped in the hallway. If she was right, Chloe Evans wasn't just a debtor. She was the unwitting owner of a digital weapon worth millions. And she was standing in a torn emerald dress, looking at him not with fear, but with the exhilaration of a puzzle finally solved. We have to go back, Chloe said. We have to decode them before Drayton figures it out. Nicholas let out a short, sharp breath. He reached out and brushed the concrete dust from her cheek. His thumb lingered on her lower lip for a second. You really are your father's daughter, he murmured. He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. It wasn't a protective grip anymore. It was a partnership. Let's go home, Nicholas said. We have some art to critique. He led her down the corridor, deeper into the dark, away from the wreckage of the ambush, and toward the revelation that would change everything. The gala was forgotten. The real show was waiting in the basement of the penthouse. The silence inside the penthouse was different now. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of secrets that had filled the space weeks ago, nor was it the sterile quiet of a luxury hotel. It was the vibrating, pressurized silence that follows an explosion. The air felt charged, as if the molecules themselves were still shaking from the gunfire in the tunnel. Nicholas leaned against the marble island in the kitchen, his tuxedo jacket discarded on a bar stool, his shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest. His breathing had slowed, but the adrenaline was still visible in the tightness of his jaw and the way his eyes tracked Chloe as she moved. There was a shallow gash on his left forearm, a graze from a bullet fragment or a piece of jagged metal from the car door. It was bleeding sluggishly, staining the white cuff of his shirt a stark, violent crimson. Sit, Chloe said. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly as she set a first aid kit on the counter. It's a scratch, Nicholas dismissed, reaching for a bottle of whiskey. I've had worse shaving. I said sit, Nicholas. He paused, the bottle halfway to a glass. He looked at her. She was a mess of ruined elegance. The emerald silk dress was torn at the hem, dusted with gray concrete powder, and stained with grease. Her hair was a wild halo around her face, and there was a smudge of dirt on her cheekbone. But her eyes were fierce, commanding in a way he had never seen before. She wasn't asking him as a maid. She was ordering him as a partner who had just survived a kill zone with him. Nicholas set the bottle down. A corner of his mouth ticked up. Yes, ma'am. He sat on the stool. Chloe moved into his space. The scent of her, vanilla, concrete, and fear, filling his senses. She poured antiseptic onto a cotton pad. This will sting, she warned. Do your worst. She pressed the pad to the wound. Nicholas didn't flinch, didn't even blink. He just watched her face. He watched the way her brow furrowed in concentration, the way her teeth worried her lower lip. He watched the dexterity of her fingers that could clean a mansion, spot a font error in a ledger, and now, dress a wound. Drayton was right about one thing, Nicholas said quietly, breaking the silence. Your father was a genius, but he was wrong about the drive. If Peter Evans had a digital key worth $50 million, he wouldn't have died in a charity ward owing money to low-level thugs. Chloe froze. She taped the gauze over his arm, her hands lingering on his skin for a heartbeat longer than necessary. She looked up, her eyes wide and searching. He didn't die because he was broke, she whispered, the realization cementing itself in her mind. He died because he was waiting. Waiting for what? For me to be safe, Chloe said. She stepped back, pacing the small area of the kitchen floor, her mind racing faster than it ever had during the ambush. He knew Drayton was watching him. If he tried to sell the key, they would have seen the movement. They would have come for me to get to him, so he hid it. He hid it somewhere he knew they wouldn't look, Because they don't respect art. They only respect hardware. The paintings, Nicholas said. He stood up, testing the movement of his arm. You said he started painting 6 months before he died. He was terrible at it, Chloe said, a hysterical little laugh bubbling up. God, he was awful. He painted these chaotic, abstract messes, layers and layers of acrylic paint, slathered on top of each other. He called it his noise phase. I told him to stick to coding. I almost threw them out when I was evicted, but they were the last thing he touched. So I kept them. Where are they? Nicholas asked. The predator was back in his eyes, the sharp, calculating look of a man who smells blood in the water. In the basement storage, Chloe said, next to the winter decorations. Show me. They didn't take the elevator. They took the stairs, moving with a synchronized urgency. They descended past the living quarters, past the gym, down into the climate-controlled belly of the building where Nicholas kept the things he didn't need but couldn't destroy. The storage room was vast, lined with metal shelving. Chloe moved straight to the back, pushing aside a stack of plastic bins. There, leaning against the wall, wrapped in brown butcher paper, were 4 large canvases. She tore the paper off the first one. Nicholas stared at it. It was objectively a disaster, a riot of clashing colors, violent reds, muddy browns, electric blues, swirled together in a way that suggested frustration rather than inspiration. There was no form, no subject, just noise. It looks like a migraine, Nicholas observed dryly. It's not art, Chloe murmured, running her hand over the textured surface. It's data. He used to talk about steganography, the practice of concealing a message within another message. He said the best hiding place is something so ugly, nobody wants to look at it twice. How do we read it? Nicholas asked. If it's painted over, the data is physical. Is it under the layers? No, Chloe said. She turned to him. Do you have a UV light? Or a blue light scanner? He used to mix fluorescent compounds into his pigments. He said he liked the way they glowed in the dark of the code. I have a forensic light source in the safe room, Nicholas said. Ethan uses it to sweep for biologicals. He left and returned 2 minutes later with a heavy, handheld device. He handed it to Chloe. Do the honors. Chloe took the heavy light. Her thumb hovered over the switch. If she was wrong, her father really was just a gambling addict who died leaving her nothing but debt. If she was wrong, the last hour of gunfire and terror was for nothing. She flicked the switch. The room plunged into semi-darkness as the powerful ultraviolet beam cut through the air. She swept the light over the first painting. Nothing happened. Just the dull fluorescence of cheap acrylic paint. Her heart sank. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was just noise. Try the next one, Nicholas commanded softly. He was standing right behind her, his presence a solid wall of heat and support. Don't stop. Chloe moved to the second canvas. Nothing. She moved to the third. A mess of grays and blacks. Nothing. It has to be here, she whispered, panic rising. She turned to the fourth canvas. It was the smallest one, a swirl of deep forest greens and blacks. Green. The color he had told her to wear, the color of her eyes. She raised the light. The beam hit the canvas. Instantly, the painting vanished. In its place, glowing with a ghostly neon blue luminescence, was a perfect, intricate geometric pattern. It wasn't just shapes. It was a QR code, a massive, complex matrix of data points painted with microscopic precision using invisible UV reactive dye, hidden amidst the chaotic brushstrokes of the visible spectrum. Nicholas inhaled sharply. Mother of God. It's not a painting, Chloe breathed, stepping closer, mesmerized by the glowing blue light. It's a gateway. The code was impossibly detailed. It was a masterpiece of patience and steady hands. Her father hadn't spent his final months gambling. He had spent them painting his legacy, stroke by invisible stroke, right under the noses of the men who were threatening to break his legs. Can you scan it? Nicholas asked. I need the laptop, Chloe said. And I need a high-res camera. Use my phone, Nicholas said, handing it to her. It's encrypted and linked to the secure server. Chloe took the phone. Her hands were steady now. She framed the glowing blue matrix on the screen. The camera struggled to focus on the light for a second, then locked on. Beep. A link appeared on the screen. It wasn't a website. It was a direct IP address to a secure cloud server, followed by a request for a biometric key. "It wants a password," Chloe said, "or a fingerprint." "He didn't have your fingerprints," Nicholas said, leaning over her shoulder to look at the screen. "Think, Chloe. What did he leave you? What did he know you would remember?" "He didn't leave me anything," Chloe said. "Just the debt, and—" She paused. "And the lullaby." "The what?" "When I was little," Chloe said, her voice soft in the dark basement. "He used to sing this stupid song to help me sleep when Mom died. It wasn't a real song. It was just numbers. He made it a rhyme. 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. Fibonacci," Nicholas said. "Again." "No," Chloe shook her head. "That's the start. But the end? The end was always the date he met my mother. August 14th, 1996. She typed in the numbers. 1 day, war 196. Access denied. Damn it, she hissed. "Try the reverse," Nicholas suggested. "He was a coder. Backdoors are often mirrored." Chloe typed. 699 bar 80. Access granted. The screen flashed green. A file directory opened. It wasn't just one account. It was a master list. Tirana Holdings, Drayton LLC, Eagle Logistics. Hundreds of files. And next to each file, a routing number and a private encryption key. "This is it," Chloe whispered, scrolling through the list. "This is everything. Every dollar they laundered, every bribe they paid, every offshore account they hid from the IRS and the other families. It's all here. Nicholas, this isn't just the money. This is their entire operational history." Nicholas took the phone from her hand. He scrolled through the data, his eyes reflecting the blue glow of the screen. He saw the numbers. He saw the power. With a single click, he could drain their accounts. With another click, he could send this evidence to the FBI and have the entire Albanian faction indicted by morning. "He stole the crown jewels," Nicholas murmured, "and he hid them in a $3 canvas." He looked at Chloe. The UV light was still in her hand, casting strange shadows across her face. She looked exhausted, battered, and utterly triumphant. "You realize what you just did?" Nicholas asked. "I finished the job," Chloe said. "You ended a war," Nicholas corrected. "With this, Drayton is dead. He just doesn't know it yet. I can bankrupt him before he wakes up. I can destroy his reputation, his leverage, his ability to pay his soldiers. By tomorrow noon, his own men will turn on him when their checks bounce." He turned off the phone screen. The darkness of the room returned, save for the eerie glow of the UV flashlight Chloe was holding. "You're free," Nicholas said. "Truly free. The debt is irrelevant now. The value of this data covers your 150,000 1,000 times over. You can take your cut, go to Paris, buy a villa, and never look back." It was the same offer he had planned to make later. But saying it now, in the dark, felt different. It felt like a test. Chloe clicked the flashlight off. Pitch blackness swallowed them. "I don't want Paris." Her voice came from the dark, closer than he expected. Nicholas didn't move. "What do you want?" "I want to see you destroy them," Chloe said. "I want to be there when you hit enter. I want to watch the balance hit 0. Nicholas reached out in the darkness. His hand found her waist. The silk was torn, exposing the skin of her side. It was warm, soft, and alive. "You have a vengeful streak, Chloe Evans," he murmured. "I learned from the best," she whispered back. The air between them crackled. The intellectual intimacy of the last week, the terror of the tunnel, the shared adrenaline of the discovery. It all coalesced into a single, undeniable point of gravity. Nicholas pulled her in. There was no hesitation this time. No employee handbook to consider. No boundaries. They were two people standing on top of a conquered empire. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was a collision. It was the taste of whiskey, copper, and victory. Nicholas's hand tangled in her hair, pulling her head back to deepen the kiss. devouring the sound she made in her throat. Chloe's hands, no longer shaking, gripped the lapels of his ruined tuxedo jacket, pulling him closer, anchoring herself to him. He lifted her, effortlessly, sitting her on the edge of a metal shelf. Her legs wrapped around his waist, the torn dress riding up. The cool metal pressed against her skin, contrasting with the searing heat of his body. "Nicholas," she gasped against his mouth. "I told you," he growled, trailing kisses down the column of her throat, finding the pulse that beat frantically there. "I don't let people touch what's mine. I'm not a possession," she breathed, her fingers digging into his shoulders. He stopped. He looked up at her in the shadows, his eyes adjusting enough to see the fire in hers. "No," he agreed, his voice rough. "Possessions are replaceable. You aren't." He kissed her again, slower this time, with a possessive, deliberate intensity that made her knees weak. It was a promise. It was a claim. "Upstairs," he commanded, pulling back slightly. "Not here. Not in a basement. The drive." Chloe gestured vaguely to the phone. "It's safe. It's in the cloud now," Nicholas said. He gripped her waist and lifted her down, but he didn't let go. He kept her pressed against him as they walked back to the stairs. "Tonight, the war waits. Tonight, we celebrate the victory." They ascended the stairs, leaving the ugly paintings and the invisible millions in the dark. The journey up to the penthouse felt like an ascent to a throne. When they reached the hallway of the residential wing, Nicholas didn't guide her to her room in the east wing. He guided her to the double doors at the end of the hall, the master suite. He kicked the door open. The room was vast, dominated by a king-sized bed and a wall of windows overlooking the city they had just brought to its knees. Nicholas stopped in the center of the room. He reached out and touched the zipper of her dress. "This dress," he murmured, the sound vibrating against her skin. "I told you to burn the uniform. I think this one needs to go too. It's ruined anyway," Chloe whispered, stepping out of her heels. "Then let's finish it," Nicholas said. He lowered the zipper. The green silk fell to the floor in a whisper of fabric, leaving her standing in the moonlight, stripped of everything but her courage. Nicholas looked at her, and for the first time, Chloe didn't feel invisible. She felt like the only thing in the world that mattered. He took off his jacket, tossing it onto a chair. He pulled her onto the bed, covering her body with his. The weight of him grounding her, protecting her, claiming her. "Partners," she whispered into the dark. A final condition. Nicholas kissed her forehead, then her lips. Partners. And as the city slept below them, unaware of the shift in power that had just occurred in a basement, Nicholas Richetti and Chloe Evans sealed their alliance in the only way left to them, with skin and breath and a desperate, consuming need that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with survival. The dawn that broke over Manhattan was gray and steel-hard, mirroring the resolve that had settled in the master suite of the Richetti penthouse. The intimacy of the night before, the frantic, life-affirming collision of skin and breath, had not softened Nicholas. If anything, it had sharpened him. He moved through the room with the precise, predatory energy of a tiger that had finally decided to stop pacing and start hunting. Chloe sat on the edge of the massive bed, wrapped in a black silk sheet. She watched him dress. He wasn't putting on a suit today. He pulled on dark tactical trousers, heavy boots, and a fitted black thermal shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. He looked less like a CEO and more like the warlord Drayton accused him of being. He walked to the wall safe, the keypad beeping softly under his fingers. He pulled out a sleek, matte black device. It wasn't a gun. He turned and walked to the bed, holding it out to her. "Take it," Nicholas said. Chloe let the sheet slip, reaching out to grasp the object. It was heavy, cold, and hummed with a latent electric threat. A taser. Military grade. "Safety is here," Nicholas said, guiding her thumb to the switch. His voice was low, devoid of the softness he had shown her in the dark hours of the morning. "Flick it down. Aim for the center mass. If he's close, shove it into his neck. Hold the trigger for 5 seconds. Do not let go until he drops. Do you understand?" "I understand," Chloe said, testing the weight of it in her hand. 5 seconds. It will feel like a lifetime, Nicholas warned. But if you hesitate, if you flinch, he will take it from you. I won't flinch. Nicholas studied her. She was bruised, her hair was a mess, and she was holding a weapon. But she didn't look afraid. She looked ready. He nodded, satisfied, and turned back to the safe to retrieve his own equipment. A pair of suppression-ready handguns, and a small silver USB drive. The drive, Chloe noted. A decoy, Nicholas explained, slipping it into his pocket. It's loaded with a rootkit virus. If they plug it in, it fries their hardware, but they won't get the chance to plug it in. The goal isn't to give them data. The goal is to keep them in the room long enough for the cavalry to arrive. The FBI? My contacts at the Bureau received an anonymous tip 10 minutes ago, Nicholas said, checking his watch. Encrypted files linking Drayton's crew to human trafficking, narcotics, and the attempted murder of a prominent businessman last night, along with GPS coordinates for a meeting taking place at 10 a.m. in the Navy Yard. You're turning him in, Chloe said, standing up and letting the sheet fall to the floor. She walked to the closet where her new clothes, the ones Nicholas had ordered for her new station, were hanging. She chose black jeans and a dark turtleneck. Practical, invisible, lethal. I'm not just turning him in, Nicholas corrected. I'm hand-delivering him. Drayton is slippery. If I just send the data, he flees to Albania. He disappears. I need him pinned down. I need him holding the smoking gun when the doors get kicked in. And I'm the bait, Chloe said. She pulled the jeans on, wincing slightly as the fabric brushed against a bruise on her hip from the car crash. Nicholas stopped. He walked over to her, gripping her shoulders. You are not bait. You are a participant. I told you I could do this alone. You insisted on coming. Because he needs to see me, Chloe said, looking up at him. He thinks I'm weak. He thinks I'm a scared little maid hiding behind her daddy's debt. If I'm not there, he gets suspicious. If I'm there, he gets arrogant. And arrogance makes him sloppy. Nicholas stared at her, a fierce pride burning in his chest. You're right. But know this. If things go sideways, if the Bureau is late, if Drayton decides to shoot before he talks, I will put a bullet in him. I don't care about the law. I care about you walking out of that warehouse. I know, Chloe said. She slipped the taser into the waistband of her jeans, covering it with her shirt. Let's go finish this. The drive to the Brooklyn Navy Yard was silent. Ethan drove the backup car, a nondescript sedan this time, not the armored SUV, which was currently being scrapped to hide the evidence of the firefight. Nicholas drove the lead car, a vintage muscle car that roared with American aggression. The Navy Yard was a graveyard of industry, a sprawling complex of rusting cranes, dry docks, and hollowed-out warehouses that smelled of salt water, diesel, and decay. It was neutral ground, theoretically. In practice, it was a place where screams were swallowed by the wind coming off the East River. They pulled up to Warehouse 4B. It was a cavernous brick structure with shattered windows high up near the roofline. A single black van was parked out front. He's here, Nicholas said, killing the engine. He looked at Chloe. Last chance to stay in the car. Not happening, Chloe said. She opened her door before he could argue. The wind off the river was biting, whipping Chloe's hair across her face. She pushed it back, lifting her chin. She walked beside Nicholas, not behind him. They moved in sync, their footsteps echoing on the cracked concrete. The warehouse door rolled open with a screech of rusted metal. Inside, the space was vast and shadowed, illuminated by shafts of dusty light cutting through the gloom. In the center of the open floor, standing by a folding table, was Drayton. He was flanked by 4 men, the remnants of his crew after the tunnel ambush. He wore a bandage on his cheek where glass must have cut him, and his leather jacket creaked as he crossed his arms. He smiled when he saw them. It was a smile of oil and malice. "The happy couple," Drayton called out, his voice bouncing off the metal walls. "I'm surprised, Richetti. I didn't think you'd bring her. I thought you'd lock her in a tower." She wanted to say goodbye, Nicholas said calmly, stopping 10 yards from the table. He didn't raise his hands. He stood with his arms loose at his sides, his jacket unbuttoned to reveal the shoulder holster. It was a statement. I am armed and I am not hiding it. Brave, Drayton sneered. He looked at Chloe, his eyes raking over her form with a disgusting familiarity. You look different, cleaner. Did he buy you new clothes? Did he fix your hair? You're still just a rat's daughter, Chloe. You can dress it up, but you still smell like debt. Chloe felt a spike of cold rage, but she forced her face to remain blank. I have what you want, Drayton. Do you? Drayton uncrossed his arms. Step forward. Let me see it. Nicholas moved to intercept, but Chloe put a hand on his arm. It's okay, she murmured. She stepped forward, alone. She stopped 5 feet from the table. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver USB drive. It glinted in the dim light. The master key, she lied, her voice steady. The encryption codes for the offshore accounts, the routing numbers, the blackmail files, it's all here. Drayton's eyes widened. Greed, naked and ugly, washed over his face. He licked his lips. Hand it over. The debt is cleared, Chloe said, holding the drive tight. You take this, and you vanish. You never say my name again. You never come near me again. Or Nicholas destroys you. Drayton laughed. Destroy me? With what? I have the leverage now. He gestured to his men. They raised their assault rifles, aiming them at Nicholas. You think you're in a position to negotiate, little girl? You're in my house now. We had a deal, Nicholas said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. The drive for peace. Deals change, Drayton said. He stepped around the table, moving toward Chloe. I take the drive. I kill you, Ricchetti, because you're a nuisance. And I take the girl. She's proved she's useful. Maybe she can find more lost treasures for me. He was close now. Too close. He was breaking the perimeter. Give it to me, Drayton demanded, reaching out his hand. Chloe looked at the drive, then at Drayton. She saw the confidence in his eyes, the absolute certainty that he had won. Okay, she whispered. She tossed the drive. It wasn't a gentle toss. She threw it high, over his head, toward the back of the warehouse. What the... Drayton's head snapped up, his eyes following the silver arc of the metal. His reflex was to lunge for it, to catch the fortune before it hit the dirty floor. In that split second of distraction, Chloe moved. She didn't run away. She stepped in. She closed the distance between them in a single stride. Her hand went to her waistband. She drew the black device Nicholas had given her. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think about the morality of it. She thought about Mrs. Moretti. She thought about the rain. She thought about the tunnel. She jammed the prongs of the taser into the side of Drayton's neck. Drop, she hissed. She pulled the trigger. The sound was a sharp, electrical crackle, like a whip snapping. Drayton's body went rigid. His eyes rolled back in his head. His mouth opened in a silent scream as 50,000 volts overrode his nervous system. He convulsed, his muscles locking up instantly. Hold it! Nicholas roared from behind her. Chloe held the trigger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Drayton crumbled. He didn't slump. He fell like a cut tree, hitting the concrete face first with a sickening thud. Chaos erupted. Drayton's men shouted, swinging their rifles toward Chloe. But Nicholas was already moving. He didn't fire at them. He fired at the ceiling. 3 rapid shots that boomed like cannon fire in the enclosed space. FBI, drop your weapons. The shout didn't come from Nicholas. It came from the massive bay doors at the rear of the warehouse, which shattered inward as an armored Bearcat vehicle rammed through the metal. At the same moment, the skylights above exploded inward. Ropes dropped. Men in tactical gear rappelled down, their laser sights cutting through the dust. Federal agents on the ground, now! The confusion was absolute. Drayton's men froze. They were thugs, bullies, not soldiers. Faced with a sudden, overwhelming force of federal agents, their survival instinct kicked in. They dropped their rifles. They raised their hands. Nicholas didn't wait to watch the arrest. He sprinted to Chloe. She was standing over Drayton's twitching body, the taser still in her hand, her chest heaving. She looked wild. Nicholas grabbed her arm. Move! Back exit! He pulled her away from the center of the room, just as a flashbang grenade detonated near the front entrance to disorient the remaining guards. The world turned white and ringing. Nicholas navigated the chaos by memory. He dragged Chloe behind a stack of shipping crates, moving toward a small fire door hidden in the shadows of the west wall. He kicked the bar, and the door flew open. They spilled out into the alleyway behind the warehouse. The air was cool and smelled of the river. The noise of the raid, shouts, boots on metal, the barking of orders, was muffled behind them. They didn't stop. Nicholas led her down the alley, weaving through a maze of dumpsters and old machinery. They ran until they reached a chain-link fence that had been cut open previously. Nicholas's prep work. They slipped through the gap. Only then, with the warehouse 2 blocks behind them and the sound of sirens converging on the location from every direction, did Nicholas slow down. He pulled Chloe into the alcove of a brick building, pressing her against the wall to check her. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands framing her face, his eyes searching hers. "Did he touch you?" Chloe was breathless, her pupils blown wide with adrenaline. She looked down at her hand. She was still gripping the taser so hard her knuckles were white. "I got him," she whispered, a fierce grin breaking across her face. "Nicholas, I dropped him." "You did," Nicholas breathed, a laugh escaping him, a sound of pure relief and incredulity. "You baited him, you distracted him, and you took down a cartel boss. He looked so surprised," Chloe said, her voice shaking now, the reality hitting her. "He didn't think I would do it." "He underestimated you," Nicholas said. "Everyone does. That is your superpower." He gently pried the taser from her fingers, safetied it, and shoved it into his pocket. Then he pulled her into him, wrapping his arms around her tightly, burying his face in her hair. He held her as if she were the only solid thing in a spinning world. "The FBI will find the real drive on him," Nicholas murmured against her ear. "I planted the original data, the one you decoded, in his jacket pocket while he was convulsing on the floor. When they search him, they'll find the proof of everything." "He's gone, Chloe. He's buried under a mountain of federal charges. He will never see sunlight again." Chloe pulled back slightly to look at him. "You planted it? When?" "I have fast hands," Nicholas smirked. "And you gave me a 5-second window." "Partners," Chloe reminded him. "Partners," he agreed. They stood there for a moment, listening to the distant wail of sirens that signaled the end of Chloe's nightmare. The debt was gone. The threat was caged. The invisible shackles that had bound her to a life of fear had been broken, not by a prince saving a damsel, but by a woman wielding lightning in her hand, and a man who trusted her enough to let her use it. "Where do we go now?" Chloe asked. "Back to the penthouse?" Nicholas looked at her. He saw the grease on her cheek, the fierce light in her eyes, the way she stood tall despite the exhaustion. He realized that the penthouse, the fortress he had built to keep the world out, was no longer enough. She deserved more than a cage, even a gilded one. "Not yet," Nicholas said. "Ethan has the car waiting 3 blocks south. We're going to get breakfast." Chloe blinked. "Breakfast? We just raided a warehouse." "Exactly," Nicholas said, taking her hand. "And I seem to remember you owe me a burger. Or was it lobster?" "Pancakes," Chloe decided, squeezing his hand. "I want pancakes. With strawberries." "Done," Nicholas said. They walked out of the alcove and onto the street. They walked away from the sirens, away from the smoke, and away from the past. They walked like 2 people who owned the city, not because they ruled it with fear, but because they had conquered it together. The sun finally broke through the gray clouds, casting a long golden shadow ahead of them. Chloe Evans, the maid who stole leftovers, was gone. Beside the Mafia boss walked Chloe Evans, the partner, the strategist, the survivor. And as Nicholas opened the car door for her, he knew that the real story wasn't about how he saved her. It was about how she had woken him up. The dust had settled over New York, but the air inside the Ricchetti penthouse felt heavier than it had during the storm. 3 days had passed since the raid on the Navy Yard. 3 days since the FBI had dragged a convulsing Drighton out of a warehouse, effectively dismantling the Albanian threat that had shadowed the city's underbelly for a decade. The news cycles were full of it. A massive federal sweep, a crackdown on organized crime, a victory for the justice system. Inside the penthouse, however, there was no champagne. There was only a quiet, vibrating tension that stretched between the East Wing and the master suite. Nicholas Ricchetti stood in the center of his office. The room was pristine. The chaotic stacks of paper from the 2021 ledger were gone, shredded and digitized. The windows were spotless, offering a view of a city that looked deceptively peaceful under the mid-morning sun. He wore a suit again, charcoal gray, impeccably tailored, the armor of the dawn firmly back in place. But his hands, usually steady as stone, were restless. He adjusted his cufflinks. He touched the edge of his desk. He picked up the heavy, cream-colored envelope that sat on the blotter and weighed it in his hand. It contained freedom. It contained a new life. It was the most generous severance package in the history of criminal enterprise, and he hated it. He pressed the intercom button. Send her in. He didn't wait for a response. He walked to the window, turning his back to the door. He couldn't watch her walk in. He couldn't look at her and maintain the resolve he needed to do this. He had to be the architect, not the man. The architect knew that a woman like Chloe Evans, brilliant, brave, and fundamentally good, did not belong in a world where bulletproof glass was a necessity, not a luxury. He had used her to catch a thief. He had used her to crush an enemy. The transaction was complete. The door opened. The soft click of the latch was followed by the sound of footsteps. They weren't the hesitant, shuffling steps of the maid who had stolen leftovers. They were the confident, rhythmic strikes of heels on hardwood. "You wanted to see me, Nicholas?" Her voice was clear, lacking the tremor of fear that used to define her presence in this room. Nicholas took a breath, steeling himself, and turned around. Chloe stood near the leather chairs. She was wearing the green silk dress again. Not the ruined one, but a replacement he had ordered, slightly different in cut, but identical in impact. It brought out the fire in her eyes. She looked like she belonged there, standing amidst the mahogany and the power. That was exactly why she had to leave. If she stayed, she would become a target again. If she stayed, he would never let her go. "Sit down, Chloe." She didn't move. She crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly. "I prefer to stand. You look serious. Is there a new anomaly in the accounts? I was reviewing the 2023 projections this morning, and the marketing budget for the legitimate shipping arm seems inflated." "The accounts are fine," Nicholas said. He walked around the desk, holding the envelope. "The accounts are perfect, thanks to you." "Then what is it?" Nicholas extended the envelope toward her. "This is for you." Chloe looked at the packet, then at his face. Her expression shifted from professional curiosity to guarded suspicion. She didn't reach for it. "What is it?" she asked again. "Open it." She hesitated, then stepped forward and took the envelope. She broke the wax seal, the Ricchetti crest, and pulled out the documents inside. Nicholas watched her eyes scan the pages. He saw the moment the realization hit her. Her breath hitched. Her fingers tightened on the thick, expensive paper. It was a deed, a title for a fully furnished apartment in the 7th arrondissement of Paris, overlooking the Seine. Beneath it was a bank draft for $2 million, listed as a consulting bonus. And beneath that, a complete expungement of her debt, notarized and filed. "Paris," she whispered. "It's turnkey," Nicholas said, his voice flat, professional. "The apartment is in your name. The account is untraceable. You can start your design firm there. You speak enough French to get by, and your talent will do the rest. You can leave tonight. The jet is fueled and waiting at Teterboro." Chloe slowly lowered the papers. She didn't look happy. She didn't look relieved. She looked at him with a confusion that was rapidly hardening into anger. "You're firing me," she stated. "I am liberating you," Nicholas corrected. "The threat is gone. Drayton is in federal custody and will likely die in prison. Your father's debt is paid. You are free, Chloe. You don't have to clean floors. You don't have to look for font errors. You don't have to sleep in a house with armed guards at the door." "I see," she said. Her voice was dangerously quiet. "And did you ask me if I wanted to go to Paris?" "It doesn't matter what you want," Nicholas said, gripping the edge of his desk until his knuckles turned white. "It matters what is safe. You saw what happened in the tunnel. You saw the violence. That is my life, Chloe. It wasn't an anomaly. It was a Tuesday. You are a civilian. You have a gift for order, for beauty. You don't belong in the mud with me. So you're making the decision for me, Chloe said. She took a step closer, the papers crinkling in her grip. Just like Drayton made decisions for me. Just like my father made decisions for me. I am giving you the world, Nicholas snapped, his control fraying. Take the money, go to Europe, find a nice boring man who doesn't keep a submachine gun in his glove box. Be happy. Chloe stared at him. The silence stretched, thin and taut as a wire. Then she laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was a sound of absolute incredulity. You idiot, she said. Nicholas blinked, stunned. No one called him an idiot. Not even his enemies. Excuse me? You think this is about safety? Chloe asked, shaking the papers at him. You think I'm scared of the tunnel? Nicholas, I grew up terrified every single day. I lived in a building where drug deals happened in the lobby. I starved myself to pay a debt I didn't owe. I lived in fear for years. The only time in my entire life I haven't felt afraid was when I was standing next to you. I put a target on your back, Nicholas argued. No, Chloe countered fiercely. You gave me a weapon. You gave me the taser. You gave me the laptop. You gave me agency. For the first time, I wasn't a victim. I was a player. She looked down at the deed to the Paris apartment. It represented everything a sane person should want. Safety, distance, luxury. She looked back at Nicholas. She saw the pain in his eyes, the self-loathing that drove him to push her away. He thought he was saving her from himself. I don't want Paris, she said clearly. Chloe, I don't want a view of the Seine. I don't want to design logos for coffee shops in a city where I don't know anyone. She took the heavy packet of documents in both hands. She didn't break eye contact. With a sharp, violent motion, she tore the papers in half. The sound was loud in the quiet room, a definitive rejection of his charity. Nicholas flinched as if she had slapped him. She put the halves together and tore them again. Quarters, eighths. She shredded the $2 million and the European dream until they were nothing but confetti in her hands. She let the pieces fall to the floor, scattering over the Persian rug like snow. I'm not going anywhere, she said. You are throwing away a lifeline, Nicholas rasped, staring at the ruined papers. I am choosing my life. Chloe stepped over the debris, closing the distance between them. She stopped inches from him, invading his space, forcing him to acknowledge her not as a liability, but as an equal. I spent my whole life cleaning up other people's messes. My father's mess, the Drayton mess, even your mess in the archives. I'm good at it, Nicholas. I see the patterns you miss. You need me. I don't need anyone, Nicholas lied, but his voice lacked conviction. Liar, Chloe whispered. She reached out and placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. She could feel it hammering against his ribs, betraying his stoic facade. You need someone who knows the code. You need someone who can look at your empire and see where the cracks are before they break. And more importantly, you need someone who knows who you are and doesn't flinch. She looked up at him, her green eyes fierce and open. I saw you in the rain. I saw you in the basement. I saw you with Mrs. Moretti. I know the monster, Nicholas. And I know the man. I choose both. Nicholas looked down at her. He felt his defenses crumbling, brick by brick. He had spent years building walls to keep people out, to keep himself isolated and efficient. But this woman had simply walked through them, armed with nothing but a Tupperware container and a brilliant mind. It's dangerous, he warned one last time, a desperate attempt to be noble. It will never be safe. There will always be another Drayton, another war. Then we fight it, Chloe said. Together. I don't want to be kept in a tower, Nicholas. I want to help you build the walls. She grabbed his lapels, pulling him down toward her. I'm not the maid anymore. I'm not the victim. I'm the partner. Accept it. Nicholas let out a long, shuddering breath. He raised his hands and cupped her face, his thumbs tracing the line of her jaw. He looked at the mess on the floor, the millions of dollars she had destroyed just to stay with him. You are insane, he murmured, admiration coloring his tone. Absolute chaos. I learned from the best, she smiled. Okay, Nicholas whispered. He lowered his forehead to rest against hers. No Paris, no exit strategy. You stay, you work, you fight. And I love, Chloe added softly. I do that too. Nicholas froze for a second, then crushed her mouth to his. It wasn't the desperate kiss of the tunnel, or the hungry kiss of the basement. It was a seal, a vow. It was the acceptance of a future he hadn't thought he was allowed to have. I love you, he growled against her lips. God help me, I love you. He lifted her up, setting her on the edge of the obsidian desk, pushing aside the monitors and the ledgers. The business could wait. The empire could wait. The only thing that mattered was the woman who had looked at his dark, violent world and decided it was worth saving. Epilogue. 9 months later, the penthouse was no longer silent. It hadn't been silent for months. The East Wing, once a sterile corridor of guest rooms, had been converted. One room was now a high-tech design studio, filled with 3 monitors, a drawing table, and servers that hummed with the data of Richetti Global Ventures. The room next to it, however, was the source of the noise. It was being painted. Nicholas Richetti stood in the doorway, his shoulder leaning against the frame, watching the chaos. He was holding a tablet, reviewing the quarterly earnings, up 40% since the restructuring of the logistics division. But his eyes weren't on the numbers. They were on Chloe. She was standing in the center of the room, directing 2 terrified interior decorators. She was wearing loose, comfortable linen pants and one of Nicholas's dress shirts that she had commandeered, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her hair was in a messy bun, a pencil stuck through it. And she was visibly, undeniably pregnant. Her hand rested absent-mindedly on the curve of her stomach as she pointed at the wall. No, she was saying firmly. That shade of yellow is too aggressive. It clashes with the natural light. I want a soft ochre, a calming warmth, not a caution sign. Check the Pantone book again. Look for code 120713. Yes, Mrs. Richetti, the decorator stammered, scrambling to find the swatch. Nicholas smiled. He loved it when she went into full art director mode. She ran the house and the business with the same terrifying efficiency she had once applied to cleaning his kitchen. The staff adored her. Mrs. Moretti, who had been moved into a premium assisted living facility in Manhattan, paid for by the Richetti Family Trust, visited every Sunday for tea, treating Nicholas like a grandson she needed to fatten up. Even Ethan had softened, terrified of crossing the boss's boss, as he now called Chloe behind her back. Chloe turned and saw him standing there, her face lit up. The fatigue of the 3rd trimester vanished, replaced by a radiant energy that still managed to knock the wind out of him every time he saw it. Don't just stand there, she teased, waddling slightly as she walked toward him. Tell them I'm right about the yellow. You're right about everything, Nicholas said, straightening up and walking to meet her. I learned that lesson the hard way. He placed a hand on her stomach. As if on cue, a strong kick pushed against his palm. He's awake, Nicholas said, his voice dropping to a whisper. She, Chloe corrected, placing her hand over his. I'm telling you, it's a girl. She's stubborn. She kicks whenever I look at a spreadsheet with bad formatting. If she's anything like her mother, I'm in trouble, Nicholas murmured. He leaned down and kissed her. A slow, lingering connection that made the decorators awkwardly busy themselves with paint samples. How are the numbers? Chloe asked, nodding at the tablet. Better than ever, Nicholas said. The rebranding of the logistics arm is complete. The legitimate revenue streams have finally overtaken the legacy operations. We're clean, Chloe. Or as clean as we can be. Good, she said. I don't want our daughter worrying about federal raids. I want her worrying about color theory and calculus. She will have everything, Nicholas promised. She will never know what it means to be hungry. She will never know what it means to be afraid. She'll know resilience, Chloe said firmly. We'll teach her that. We'll teach her that if you don't like the pattern, you fix it. Nicholas looked at his wife. He thought about the night he found her stealing roast beef in the dark. He thought about the rain, the debt, the fear. It felt like a different lifetime, lived by different people. He took her hand, squeezing it gently. The ring on her finger, a vintage emerald set in platinum, caught the light. "Lunch?" he asked. Chloe's eyes sparkled. "Is the chef making the risotto?" "He is, and I believe there's a chocolate soufflé involved." "Then what are we waiting for?" She grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the kitchen. "I'm starving." Nicholas let her lead him. He would always let her lead him. He followed her out of the nursery, down the hall lined with art that wasn't stolen but chosen, and into the heart of a home that was no longer a fortress, but a sanctuary. They had built an empire from the ashes of their pasts. They had balanced the ledger. And now, as they walked together toward the future, Nicholas knew that the greatest wealth he possessed wasn't in the offshore accounts or the real estate portfolio. It was right there, holding his hand, carrying the next generation of the Richetti line, proving every single day that even the most broken things could be designed into something beautiful. The end.